It's the unofficial home of Draftkings Best Ball in the UK. That's right, Fantasy Sanctuary, Draftkings Best Ball show. Loads to get into tonight. We're going to talk some winners and losers. We're going to get into a draft. We're going to talk the players who are rising, the players who are falling, all of that and much more as we go on our quest to win big in 2024. Yes, that's right. We're talking risers and fallers tonight before we get into a draft. And the drafts have been open for a little over 3 weeks now. So there's been time for ADP to settle. There's been time for players to fluctuate. There's been times for players to drop. And the drops are happening, but a lot slower. So we will get into them. Appreciate everyone hanging out in the chat tonight. A lot of good people here. A lot of smart people who no doubt will be jumping into the draft with us. Since the draft's opened, when it comes to the risers, there have been some big movers, none bigger than Taysom Hill, who, when it opened last year and for the year before, Taysom Hill has been a quarterback on DraftKings. So I think it kind of took people slightly by surprise that this year he was listed as a tight end. So initially he didn't quite creep up, and then after a little while, we saw him really start to rock it up. And 165 for me, I feel completely happy with that. I'd have him maybe 5 or 6 spots ahead of that in terms of my pure rankings. Then the next player, Keon Coleman, I mean, he is going to be the wide receiver one for the Bills, whether he can earn more targets than Dalton Kincaid, Dawson Knox, these guys, Curtis Samuel, remains to be seen. But the big playability from him is definitely there. It sounds like he's going to be on the field a lot. So again, that kind of makes sense. If you're in the chat, I'd love to hear how high would Keon Coleman get where you suddenly feel like, I can't quite do this anymore. That's a little too high for me. Darren Waller, up 28 spots to 193. I mean, what positive news has he been that's brought him up there? Is this just more people who are getting ready to take speculative shots on him? For me, I've maybe drafted him once, and that's about it. I'm not going to hit on all these players, but just some of the highlights. Dameon Pierce up slightly, deserves to be. I mean, there's a big disparity between where him and Joe Mixon goes. I'm not sure that Dameon Pierce will definitely be on the roster in September, but right now, 195, even up to sort of 180, I'd feel completely fine with. Ben Sinnott, not a player I've been taking a lot of. Tyrone Tracy, that one we could see coming. I think he'll continue to rise up into the 170s. Odell Beckham, I mean, that's barely drafted, doesn't really need doing. Zeke at 127. Again, it just kind of makes sense at that price. You can either be in or out. I find myself sometimes I want to take him depending on the build I'm doing, but not all the time. TJ Hawkinson, what the hell are we doing? Rising 21 spots up to 118. If you're in this draft and you're taking TJ Hawkinson consistently, you've got to just shame yourself right now. Put it in the comments and let us know, because as much as TJ Hawkinson might be the theoretical play for, okay, he can give me a week winning performance in the playoffs when it really counts, you're going to carry a player at an ADP of 118 for what, 12, 13 games? That's not something I can manage. Like, I just think there are better picks to be had. And until Hawkinson ends up in the 140, 150 range, I'm not drafting him. As Tyler says, TJ Hawk drafters find God challenge. Absolutely. Shout out to Bindles in the chat as well. Busy man, lots of streams going on this week. If you haven't checked out his channel as well, do yourself a favor and go and subscribe there when this video is over. In terms of the other risers since the draft opened, Jaden Daniels up a full round. That was something I addressed in our Discord and in my rankings. I have my concerns about Jaden Daniels. I have my concerns about that offense and the offensive line. But Jaden Daniels' ADP is only going one way, and it's going up. And it's better to grab a bit now and start building out that portfolio than looking at it in August and going, holy shit, I've only got 4% Jaden Daniels and I want to correct that and get closer to 8. So yeah, I don't mind that at all. And of course, the big dog Derrick Henry is up by almost a round. Of course he is. Deservedly so. In the last 7 days, so nothing quite as drastic. 15 spots for Zay Jones, which makes sense with him siding with the Cardinals. I think that's a fine late round sort of mixer to put in for correlation purposes. Donta Foreman up slightly. Quentin Johnson up slightly after the Chargers said positive things about him. Jalen Tolbert up, and I think he's going to continue to go up after the Cowboys said that they plan on him taking a big step. We got Keel in the chat saying sitting at 5% exposure. Okay, 5% and below, I'll allow that, but I'm definitely not getting anyone sitting around 8. It's time to have a word. Jameson Williams up slightly. Jared Goff up slightly, probably on the back of his contract. Demarcus Robinson up slightly more after kind of climbing 20 spots. So yeah, plenty of guys on the move. Nobody in there in the last 7 days who I look at and go, I don't really want to draft them. I mean, Justin Watson, I don't really get that. But Jameson Williams, Rich in the chat saying he wants no part of Jameson. When we get into the draft, when it gets to that sort of round pick 100, wide receiver just goes off a cliff edge. So there aren't many guys in that range who I really feel comfortable taking. So I will take Jameson Williams if push comes to shove, but I definitely don't have a lot. Let's spin over to the Fallers. First, if it's your first time finding us here in Sanctuary, hit the subscribe button down below. We've got Underdogs drafts on Monday nights. We've got Draftkings drafts every Wednesday night. Next week, Pat Corain's joining us. A lot of good stuff coming your way, as well as a constant stream of Dynasty content from Rich. So since the drafts opened on, what was it, May 29th, April 30th, Rashee Rice, the biggest faller. And I think this is about as far as we're going to see Rashee Rice fall. With the news for the assault thing that was going on with the photographer or whatever, there are no charges being brought on him. And yes, the NFL can still bring charges against him for violating the conduct code, but it feels a little bit better than it did with that if that had actually been going to court as well. So pick 90, I don't think we're going to start seeing him slide any further than that. And I think it's okay to be in at that price. Michael Mayer down 26 spots, completely makes sense. Drake May, I mean, I don't really understand this one because most people didn't expect him to start day one. Yes, there's not been anything out of Patriots camp suggesting he could start day one. It's been more like that he does have things to work on. But I mean, I was fine with Drake May around pick 175. At 194, I'll definitely take some shots in 3 QB builds. Trey Franklin climbing up, AD Mitchell climbing up. AD Mitchell feels like that needs to be the area where he settles now. Falling down. When drafts first opened, I mean, on Underdog, this was a guy who was going inside the top 100 pre-draft. 115 was kind of the target range where I was like, once he gets to that point, I can take him in best ball and I can build around him because he'll probably be my wide receiver 6. Elijah Mitchell falling. I mean, yeah, Elijah Mitchell's always undervalued. Other guys falling in here. Demario Douglas, despite the fact that there's been some fairly positive reports out of Patriots camp, everyone wants the shiny new things. Ricky Pearsall falling slightly. Brock Bowers out of the top 100, finally down to kind of pick 103. That makes plenty of sense. Roma Dunze, I thought Roma Dunze would get steamed. I had a fairly aggressive initial ranking on him, but he's kind of fallen down a bit. And so far, it doesn't feel like there's going to be much that's going to help him get back up. And where he goes in the drafts at the minute, he's somebody I've been clicking a little bit over the last couple of days because it just kind of makes sense for a lot of builds when you're after your wide receiver 4 or 5 and you can carry a rookie through the opening stages. So let's go over to the last 7 days. And once we've done this, we're going to get into a draft. So do stick around. It will not be long. Keaton Mitchell falling 8.7 spots in the last 7 days. It's not really a surprise. His initial ADP was too high. This is a guy who had a serious knee injury in December. We're not talking about somebody who got injured in October. Like, he was never going to be back out there early on in the season. And there were reports today that he was at Ravens training camp watching with no brace on. And John Harbaugh said that he's a little ahead of schedule. That's fine, but this is still going to be a long process. And then who else we got in here? TJ Hawkinson. So despite me berating anyone who's taken a lot of him, he is starting to fall slightly. But I mean, I'm talking 30 picks before I'll really be interested in him. Odell Beckham falling slightly after an initial jump up. It makes sense. You know, you always get that initial excitement and then a player settles down a bit. Nick Chubb falling slightly. We can get Nick Chubb to pick 120. That's kind of range where I'll be interested, even though there's a lot of interesting running backs around there. J.K. Dobbins, pick 148. I don't know, man. I mean, it's going to... The stream we did with Eric Bynfor, going 50 picks past ADP. That's not well, he has to go for me to be interested, but I need J.K. Dobbins to be lower than that, or there to be some positive reports about him. If there's a player that you feel like has been dropping lately, or somebody who you have an idea of, right, I'm waiting until they hit this price point. I want to know. Leave it in the comments. Leave it in a comment below the stream when this is over. Would love to hear them. We are going to jump in a draft. Tonight, we are not drafting in the Millie Maker. We're going to be going with one of the cheaper tournaments, mix things up a little bit, play in a different one instead, and see how that goes. See how different things get in the $3 streets, because after all, there is a lot going on over here on DraftKings at the minute. Let me just shift this around. So far, yeah, that's filling pretty quickly. So might not get lots of people in from here, but if you're in, do let me know. I see a few familiar faces, definitely. If you are drafting on DraftKings, remember that they do have a promo for every 5 drafts you do in the Millie Maker in May, you get a free one. So there's only what 8-9 days left in there. So it's worth, if you're sitting at 8 drafts, you're sitting at 9, it's worth doing a couple of extra ones. If you're sitting at sort of 20, 25 is the max you can get. So after that, if you decide you want to ease back, remember there's no benefit to doing any, and there will be more offers coming next month. So I've drawn pick 1.8, which feels pretty usual. We've got Big Russian at 103. We've got James at the back at 112 and Jay Rain at 19. If I haven't said your name and you're in here, do let me know. Feel like there's probably at least 1 or 2 more names lurking in here. In terms of this contest so far, I think I've done about 10, 11 of these $3 drafts. I try not to go too crazy too early on, because this is going to take a little while to fill. It's a big contest. There's a lot of entries in this one, and you kind of want to sprinkle your entries throughout as things fill slowly. So let me see if I can pull up the details on this one. I don't think I can, but it's definitely a lot of entries. So after this, I'll maybe do 1 or 2 more and then wait until the contest is much closer to filling. The second $8 contest filled this week. I would expect we see another one of them, but I'd imagine that DK wait a week or 2, because the $3 can fill quicker. The $5 single entry will fill quicker. The $9 free max. All these contests are going to fill a little quicker if they hold off on some new contests. If you've maxed $3 already, let me know. Want to know if anybody just decided to get it out of the way nice and quickly. So yeah, in terms of a 1-8, for me, you can see on my exposures here, spike week overlay, the guys I've been taking: Bijan, Puka Nakua, Garrett Wilson, very little AJ Brown so far, less Breece Hall than I'd like, because he always seems to get picked ahead of me, but I wouldn't be unhappy with any of this range. My general rule of thumb for the first round is that I don't really want any player over 15%, and I don't want any player under 5%. For me, the first round this year as well feels pretty efficient, so I'm not feeling the need to take any large stands on it. There are years where there's players I completely want to fade, but this feels okay for now, so I'm just taking a nice balanced approach of what I will end up. Deft Angel in the chat saying I will smash in 20 slows right as it closes because I hate some. And if you want to be like Deft Angel, be one of our YouTube members, hit the join button down below. You get access to my best ball rankings, Rich's Dynasty content. You get 40% off all Spike Week products, including the overlay that I'm using here tonight. It's cheaper to sign up to us and Spike Week than it is to sign up to Spike Week on their own. And we will give you as many things as we can to help you in 2024. So Amon-Ra St. Brown falls to pick 8. I don't know, unless something crazy's happened in the last few minutes whilst I've been on here. That's an absolute smash for me. This morning I jumped in a draft and saw Amon-Ra St. Brown go at pick 103. So pick 108 feels completely fine. Keel saying, I missed this one, but I'm trying to save my $3 entries until it's close to being filled. Yeah, and it makes sense. I think if there was more low budget stuff on DraftKings, then I probably wouldn't have done so many, but I've been sat around today, haven't done a whole lot of anything, and got busy in the $3 streets for a change as we kind of wait on more things to appear. So we are a few picks away. Nothing too crazy, really. Christian McCaffrey, 101, CD Lamb, Tyreek Hill, Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, Brees Hall, Puka Nakua, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Bijan Robinson, AJ Brown. Saw some wild drafts in the last couple of days. Did a DraftKings stream with Colin Kelly on the Rotoviz channel yesterday. That was a fun one. We will be drafting on the Fantasy Sanctuary channel on Tuesday next week. We're going to bounce back and forth, do a draft on Rotoviz on one week, and then Fantasy Sanctuary the next week. So keep your eyes peeled for them. There'll be afternoon drafts if you're in the UK, morning drafts if you are in America. And like I say, Pat Carrain makes his return to the Fantasy Sanctuary next Wednesday. So if you do have questions that you want to get answered by Pat, drop them in the Discord or in the comments on here after this stream finishes, and I'll make sure we get them answered by him, pick his mind on all the kind of best ball landscape. Back to me at pick 17. And one player who I haven't drafted enough of so far is Chris Olave. I've drafted 0% of him. You can see just straight zeros across the board. So I'm going to mix him in a little bit and see where we start. I've ended up the last couple of drafts I've been doing in Hero RB builds and even a dual RB build. So it feels good to get back to a nice wide receiver heavy start. If you've got a particular pairing that you've been drafting a lot of, I want to hear that because we're at the point now where the drafts have been open for a few weeks. If you like the people in our Discord, you've been getting a lot of these late entries, a lot of the back third of the draft boards. And it does start to feel like you go, okay, well, this is my preference. I'm going to go Garrett Wilson, Marvin Harrison, or Garrett Wilson, Drake London. So do let me know what you've been drafting a lot of. Yeah, it's going to be, this is a draft where I'm going to have half an eye on the elite tight ends. I've spent today writing and prepping a video about the impact of tight ends and the top tight ends in the first 72 picks and how we want to be attacking them. So if I leave this draft without one of them, I'm going to be a little bit disappointed, but that video will be out maybe by Friday. We'll see how the real world comes at us. So as you can see, like I mentioned, I'm using the Spike Week tools, which you can get 40% off if you're one of our Golden Deck Chair members, highlighting all the Week 17 correlations that we've already got. So Brendan Ayuk plays Amon-Ra St. Brown there. And how I like to set these up is that I have all these here. So this is my percentage with, let's see if I can find a better example. Not right now, but as a draft unfolds. So this shows me my percentage of times I've taken that player with my QB1, but I don't have a QB1 right now. QB2, RB1, wide receiver 1, and tight end 1. So it's just a good way to help you kind of get different as you start to build out your portfolio. I'm a big fan of this. Deft Angel in the chat saying, I have a ton of Olave, Devonta, Higgins from rounds 2 and 3. I like that. I think Higgins and Devonta are definitely players I want to be overweight on this year. And Olave, like I said, I need to draft more of him. I think it's just been one of those situations where sometimes he hasn't fallen to me where I'd want him. And then other times I've just liked some of the other guys around him, and having no exposure to a player like Olave, who definitely seemed to get more on the same sort of wavelength with Derek Carr as the season went along. I'm down with that. So let's see. As we get into the third round, doubled elite tight end build at the 101. So I think this is something which is more viable this year than in previous years because of the quality of the tight ends who are going in the first 6 rounds. And I think their ceilings are much higher than in previous years. Last year, there was 5 different tight ends who had 2 or more 20-plus half PPR games. And in the previous year, there was only 3. So last year was a great year for tight ends. I think Travis Kelce Yes, he's getting older, but what he showed in the playoffs, where he was averaging over 75 yards a game and like 0.75 touchdowns, is enough to give anyone faith. And Sam Laporta, yes, a big part of his production came from the touchdowns, but if he can make up for by growing in other areas of the game, then he should be able to still stay ahead of the curve. So one pick away. For me, this is all wide receiver territory. There's some running backs I don't mind coming up a little bit later, but Cooper Cup I've been taking a good bit lately, so I'm probably gonna move away from that and try and build something different tonight. Nothing's gonna give me correlation, so I'm gonna lean into Jalen Waddle. I'm expecting him to bounce back. I think he's going to be integral of the Dolphins' success. Last year was kind of lots of injuries above all else, so it it didn't seem like it was down to him not being good or to not being able to connect with him. So yeah, plenty of reason to be optimistic on him. Has anyone in the chat been taking this kind of double elite tight end build? I think if I was going to do it, I'm not sure I'd go back to back, and I'm not sure I'd go with Christian McCaffrey, because now you're going to be in round 4 by the time you take your first wide receiver. And yeah, you can recover from that. It's a bit tricky. Maybe they're hoping that Patrick Mahomes falls all the way here and they end up with an elite stack, the RB1, and potentially Titan 1, Titan 2. But then you're talking one wide receiver in the first 5 rounds. It's pretty tricky. Yeah, don't know how much Laporte I'd get if he's always going to start going to a CMCO, and a 25 seems a bit steep. Yeah, it's going to be really difficult for Laporte to break away from this corner because you've got Debo, you've got Brandon Ayuk, and you've got McCaffrey all nearby. So people are going to hunt that correlation. Pick 41 for us, our 4th pick overall. Let's take Tank Dell. I haven't taken anywhere near as much Tank Dell as I've wanted, and I've still got plenty of faith in him. So now going 4 wide receivers to start. Amon-Ra St. Brown, Chris Olave, Jalen Waddle, Tank Dell. It does mean that we've got 3 choices at quarterback who'll probably fall to us. CJ Stroud is probably going to go over here on the 102, if not before then. But it'll give us Derek Carr and it'll give us Jared Goff, who aren't the most inspiring quarterbacks, but they're definitely fine if we make up for it by majority. Of course, Rich. I know Rich is a big tank guy. Keel saying I definitely have more Waddle in the 3rd than Olave in the 2nd. I get that. I mean, when you look at the wide receivers in the 2nd, you're talking Devontae Adams, Marvin Harrison, Drake London, Brandon Ayuk, Nico Collins, and Mike Evans went a bit earlier tonight. But that compared to Michael Pittman, Malik Neighbors, Stephon Diggs, Cooper Kupp, I can definitely see taking more Waddle than Olave. Jeff saying, I have a couple of McBride with, but he's not an elite tight end, they say, Pitts. Yeah, I think we kind of have to lump him into there because he's going sort of pick 72. And one of the things that I keep coming back to is we want exposure to offenses that are going to be fun. And Atlanta's offense should be fun. They should be capable of being in a shootout every week. The Falcons' defense, I don't think, is going to be particularly great. So, out of the elite tight ends, the one whose offense I probably have the most marks about is Trey McBride. I think there's a wide range of outcomes for the Cardinals this year, but I really like Trey McBride, and I'm absolutely betting on him to score more than 3 touchdowns this year. What have we got here? So, do you view going 4 wide receivers early that don't have correlation as a benefit because it gives you a wider range of stacking options, or does it spread your stacks too wide? I think it's fine. We've opened up a lot of options, so we can correlate Tank Dell with Ravens, the Chiefs later on. We can correlate Jalen Waddle with probably only Cleveland or the Texans. We've already got that week 15 correlation. Then Olave, you've got the Raiders, the Packers, the Commanders. There's plenty of correlation still to be had there. The Lions, Buffalo, Chicago, San Francisco. So week 17 correlation is a little bit trickier, but we've got plenty of draft to go. So not too worried just yet. Mark Andrews falls to us, 4 picks past ADP at pick 52. 40% exposure currently. I am not going to go into the season this crazy, but I think he's being undervalued right now. And I think there's enough influential people in the industry saying that, not just me, not saying that I'm influential, but I think Mark Andrews' price is going to rise. And starting this draft with 4 wide receivers and an elite tight end feels plenty good to me. I know that James at the pick 12 will be cursing me because he had Zay Flowers and Lamar Jackson, but he's doing just fine. He's got himself a nice start there. If you are in this draft with us, do let us know how you feel about your start. I see Big Russian at the 103, went with CJ Stroud, stacking him naked, taking him completely naked. And I know James enough to know that he feels like he needs to stack. So I'm sure that Dalton Schultz might find his way as the second tight end onto that team. And Rich saying Titan 5 is egregious. Titan 5 is egregious. Like, I'm really trying not to get on my soapbox about Ravens because I know exactly what it looks like as I sit here with the Ravens shirts behind me. But people are using Mark Andrews' age 28, as a reason not to take him higher. Travis Kelce's 34. He's not been the same. He's 6 years older than Mark Andrews, and we've seen an absolute dominant run from him over the last few years. So yes, it's different offenses. Yes, it's different quarterbacks, and yes, it's different schemes. But I am not going to stop taking Mark Andrews just because Isaiah Likely had a nice end to the season. If anything, it just makes me more bullish on the offense. James, not so happy I mentioned him taking CJ Stroud unstacked. Sorry, bud. Got to be called out sometimes. CJ Stroud is without a doubt the one quarterback that I'm a little hesitant on taking. I think he can be fine, but he just didn't really do it last year in terms of fantasy points. We are back on the clock. 4 wide receivers, 1 tight end. Nobody massively standing out. Well, let's go double elite tight end ourselves and see how this pans out. Give ourselves another avenue to a stack with Brock Purdy. See where the 101 lets at. We've got the 103 with James as well, and the 105. So there are plenty of teams in here who will want Brock Purdy most likely. But as you can see, these start to light up green on the right-hand side, thanks to the Spike Week overlay. You can see the Week 17 correlations I'm getting. I've got George Kittle, who plays Miami in Week 16, and then Detroit in Week 17. So we're just starting to build those correlations. We're not reaching for them. We're not having to prioritize them against anything else. And because I've got the double elite tight end, I can probably leave wide receiver for a little bit. And there's going to be an area of the draft which can be quite nice for quarterbacks, quite nice for tight ends, not tight ends, sorry, quite nice for running backs. So we can prioritize some other bits for a little bit. And this isn't the kind of build I would usually do. But in this $3 contest, I'm definitely open to mixing things up a little bit more, trying to do something different. A couple of years ago, I made the finals in this contest with an 11 wide receiver team. I think I had 3 healthy running backs for 95% of the season. The team flamed out in the finals, but you know, you can get a bit weird on DraftKings. You can do things differently. We saw that with the team 2 years ago that won the Millie Maker, where they had 4 quarterbacks, and 2 of them were Jordan Love and Jacoby Brissett, who barely played at all. It's not always the most foolproof approach to be trying to get completely weird for the sake of it, but I think there's just a bit more flexibility to that. Let's see what we've got going on. How are we feeling in the chat about these drafts so far? Anything catching your eye? Dak Prescott going at the top of the 7th round to the team with CD Lamb. That feels quite nice. Ramondre Stevenson. I've been wanting to draft more Ramondre, but I haven't done it. And I've only just noticed that the team at the 104 has gone wild, gone full spring break on us. Jamar Chase at the 104, Kyron Williams, Derrick Henry, Isaiah Pacheco, James Cook, Alvin Kamara, Joe Burrow. Dude, Leave some running backs for the rest of us. They're not going to go out of fashion. And the reason, I mean, we'll circle back to this in a second. One pick away. So sorting by ADP, 4 wide receivers, 2 running backs so far. I have been taking a bit of Brian Thomas. I don't mind him here. I've been taking Deontay Johnson. I've been taking DeAndre Hopkins. For both players I like. I don't have much Calvin Ridley. I think, honestly, I prefer DeAndre Hopkins' price at 84 compared to Calvin Ridley at 66. The player I'm going to take is somebody I haven't taken a lot of yet, sitting at only 3%. And I've got no James Conner with either my RB1, well, he would be my RB1, my wide receiver 1, or my tight end 1. So nice to mix that in and do it. So back to team 4, our Renegade team, who I like the fact they stacked Joe Burrow at least with Jamar Chase. The reason I can't do this is you start 3 wide receivers plus a wide receiver potentially in the flex. You start 2 running backs plus potentially a running back in the flex. So now 2 of your first 6 picks can't possibly ever enter the lineup. You can't have more than 3 of your first 6 picks. 4 of your first 6 picks in your lineup at the same time. It's just, it's a very expensive way to go. I mean, it's rare that you see a hero wide receiver build this extreme. I'm going to be interested to see who ends up as wide receiver 2, what we do at quarterback 2. I think for me, I'd have to wait and really hit on a very late couple of quarterbacks. And I definitely want to get up to 10 wide receivers with that kind of build. There were teams who made the finals of Millie Maker when it was the 969 team final 2 years ago with robust RB builds, which is where you're sort of talking 3 running backs in the first 5 and ended up with 5 total. But they all still got to 5 wide receivers before round 10, which kind of compensates for it a little bit. And I think that's where you've got to end up, really. Back on the clock, DeAndre Hopkins falls 5 picks, Rashee Rice at pick 90. And then it's kind of into the quarterbacks and some other guys. So I'm not sure that Brock Purdy's going to make it back to us, particularly given everything we've got there. But I'm going to take Rashee Rice simply because this feels like we're going to start seeing a rise soon. And maybe I'm wrong on that, but I'm prepared to play that and see how it goes. So if Brock Purdy's going to come back around to us, you're talking team here, 1 pick ahead of us with a quarterback, then another with a 1 quarterback, 1 quarterback, 1 quarterback. The only team is the one on the corner who hasn't had a quarterback since he started off with the double elite tight end build. They have Amari Cooper, Rashad White, Lad McConkey, and Jordan Addison. And of course, Brock Purdy goes to the team with Deebo Samuel. And that feels completely fine to me. I mean, if I've got Patrick Mahomes, I'm normally trying to wait until round 10 or so to take my second quarterback, but I definitely do not hate that. Death Angel saying that team needs 11 wide receivers, and even then you want one of those 5 running backs to be much later. Yeah. Sometimes perhaps we come at this from just the approach of like our little corner of content where everybody favors heavy wide receiver builds, but it just comes back to how many you can possibly fit in a lineup at once. And yes, the whole 0 RB thesis was winning the flex, and that can translate to anything. You want to dominate the flex and have the strongest possible flex position out of all the teams. But I'm not sure that James Cook, Alvin Kamara, Isaiah Pacheco really give you that in a way that some of the wide receivers do. Goff goes, Purdy goes. We're running out of quarterback options. Really hoping not to have to turn this into one of those streams where we start looking at the Patriots and Broncos later on. So in terms of quarterbacks we could take, you're talking Derek Carr for the Chris Olave stack, Tua for the Jalen Waddle stack. If I could end up with those 2 and mix in a third, that would be all right. Raheem Mostert dropping way past ADP here. 86, and we're already down to 104. I think I'm probably going to have to take Tua here just to stop the rest of the room going crazy. It's just about to look at where Tyreek was going and see if that owner would take him. But James instead takes Caleb, pairing him with DJ Moore. Can't grief him that time. So 2 picks away. I'd like to imagine that Tua isn't going here unless the team at the 107 decides to take him unstacked. Austin Eckler in the first 10 rounds. If you've been drafting a lot of Austin Eckler, sell me on it. I need to be sold on what it is people are hoping for from Austin Eckler because I don't think he's going to get the receptions. I'm not sure he's going to get all the goal line work. That offensive line is bad. In fact, James, at the 112, I know you're a Washington fan. Sell me on an upside case for our boy Austin Eckler, fantasy football's favorite running back. So we're going to take Tua. Doesn't feel great taking him slightly ahead of ADP, but this room has gotten a little quarterback hungry, and maybe I pushed it a little too far with the Brock Purdy, Jared Goff stuff. So that, yeah, through 9 rounds, started Amon-Ra St. Brown, Chris Olave, Jalen Waddle, Tank Dell, Mark Andrews, George Kittle, James Conner, Rashee Rice, and Tua. In terms of missing out on those quarterbacks, well, we got the Tank Dell triple of correlation through the playoffs: Miami, KC, and then Baltimore. George Kittle, if we had an LA Ram player on later on, then we'll get the triple threat with him. So even though we haven't got the stacks potentially as much as I would like, I think it's kind of okay if you're still building little correlations and if you can hit on the nuts of some really good outcomes from some of these top players. In terms of the rest of this draft, apart from our team with the 5 running backs, there's nothing too crazy going on. They took Brock Bowers as their tight end 1, and through 9 rounds, they have 2 wide receivers, which definitely makes me feel a little bit twitchy. But if you're going to do it, a $3 draft is definitely better to get weird in than the $20 draft, or perhaps even the 10K draft if anyone's feeling like really crazy. So, Rich, Jameson Williams on the clock. Am I taking him? Let's go. In terms of this area of the draft, there are a bunch of players who I think are fine. I'm going to take Tyler Lockett, though, because that'll really solidify my wide receiver room and give me another out to a quarterback in Geno Smith, who I've talked about a little too much lately. Angered a couple of Jets fans, maybe, by saying I'd take Geno straight up over Aaron Rodgers, but I feel fine with that. And the reason I was comfortable pushing running back is we just had a bit of a running back run. You can see that in the last round, there were, 7 running backs, Brian Robinson going just before us. Brian Robinson was a running back I would have probably taken there. But we're in a real upside area for running back, and I feel quite comfortable knowing what we've got ahead of us. Nobody hit the 3rd quarterback yet. I was in a draft earlier where a team ended up with 5 quarterbacks, which that's not for me. And then just to say that, James takes his 3rd quarterback, goes with Jaden Daniels. I can see it. I think that's a fun quarterback room with CJ Stroud, Caleb Williams, and Jaden Daniels. But I might have pushed it around the corner to see if Jaden Daniels came back. James, our resident Washington fan, saying, I've got nothing, Eckler. Yeah, that's like, so Eckler goes round 9, Brian Robinson round 10. I just don't see it, and I also don't see what it is that I'm going to lose if I'm wrong on Eckler this year. I don't think the potential is there for him to have a massive season like he's had in previous years. So one pick away. Not a single running back gone since. Oh, sorry, Gus Edwards. Can't disrespect Gus Bus. But this was basically what I was expecting there. You saw that run of running backs, and there was an area where wide receiver kind of goes off the cliff edge. And if you don't grab a wide receiver there, if you needed one, then you get into real trouble. So running backs instead. Now we're back on, and there's just a range of running backs who are quite like. Let's take Blake Corum, not just because of the Kyron Williams injury news. It gives us that San Francisco correlation week 15, Arizona week 17, and yeah, we'll just bet on a little bit of contingency upside. I would prefer Tajay Spears and Chase Brown there, but we're not going to end up with big quarterback stacks. So instead, if I can find lots of little correlations, I think that's kind of fine. I think Gemmo is fine for wide receiver 5 or 6 for weekly upside. You wouldn't want him on the 5 wide receiver, 5 running back team. That's absolutely nailed on here because we've got the team with 5 running backs. You need guys who are going to be. I think you've either got to go shooting for complete upside, which is perhaps what you're getting Christian Watson, or you need guys who are quite reliable. Jacoby Myers with Gardner Minshew or Aiden O'Connell, I don't think fits that profile. Cortland Sutton with Bo Nix, maybe, but he's probably not going to get 10 touchdowns again like last year. Some of them were very fluky. And then, yeah, Christian Watson's hamstrings are just a massive gamble. So it's a little tricky for me to feel like that team has saved itself from a running back heavy start. But maybe if they throw in 2 more wide receivers in a row, it'll start looking slightly prettier. Jerome Ford goes off the board at the 12:01. Colm yesterday on the Road of his channel was saying that he really can't help but take Jerome Ford, really thinks that there's a lot of contingent value in him right now. And I agree. I haven't clicked him as much as some of the other running backs in this range. So back on the clock. We got a little while before we want to get into the quarterback streets again. In terms of running backs, been drafting quite a bit of Zach Charbonnet, as you can see, at 40%, 15% in this tournament. But I do believe he's probably the best there, and it helps us build out a little bit more if we want the Geno stack for later. So yeah, if you want these tools, sign up to us, hit the join button down below. Less than the price of a Big Mac meal. Every month, you get all my rankings, loads of best ball resources, richest dynasty rankings, trade values, calculators, all that. You get access to our Discord, which I must say is filled with some of the very best people around. And you'll also get 40% off all Spike Week products, which makes it an absolute bargain. Sign up to Spike Week before the end of June, and you'll also get a $15 drafters ticket for their main contest this year. So it's just saving money left, right, and center. Xavier Legette goes to our friend with many, many running backs. So now he's equal the build out 1551. I don't know. Let me know in the chat. Do you think that's going to work out when we get to the end of this draft? Are we going to be looking at it and going, okay. In terms of our team, 1362 so far. Amon Ra, Chris Olave, Jalen Waddle, Tank Dell, Mark Andrews, George Kittle, James Conner, Rashi Rice, Tua, Tyler Lockett, Blake Corum, Zach Charbonnet. Geno Smith goes off the board to the team at the 2 with DK Metcalf. Can't fault that one whatsoever. It was always a bit of a risk that we might not get him coming back, but that was still 30 picks ahead of ADP. I'm not sure I'm reaching on Geno 30 picks ahead of ADP, but I get it. You know, where they were there, Geno was not coming back all the way around. If I didn't take Geno here, I would have taken Geno there. So sometimes you got to do it. It's not always pretty. Grin in your nose, hold your nose, and just bear it. So in terms of quarterbacks, yeah, we're going getting pretty thin for our stacking options. I'm not going to take Derek Carr 25 spots ahead of ADP. I simply do not care what state it leaves this team in. That is not something that we're going to do on stream around here. So let's take Jalen Wright, who's slightly past ADP, gives a little bit more Miami. If we're building into the idea that the Miami Dolphins could go nuclear down the stretch, regardless of weather concerns, then adding Jalen Wright and, hoping that he gets a good pass catching role is worth it. Pete Overzet did a good video this week talking about why we just shouldn't be bothered about weather concerns this far out. Even in Cleveland, it's just not something that we need to worry about. With all due respect to my good friend Matt, the fantasy weatherman, predicting weather on game day is really difficult. So, yeah, I'm not going to stray away from any week 17 matchup, particularly not one that's got the likes of Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill in it. So, 6 rounds left, or 7. Call it 7 to be completely accurate. James at the 112 takes his first tight end in K Dotton. Not a player I've been clicking a lot of, but I like him. I think, you're probably talking a free tight end build when you take K Dotton. How he finished the year was pretty impressive, but it's definitely still some room to grow. I'm not taking Derek Carr 22 picks ahead of ADP. If I wasn't going to take him in the last round, I'm not doing it now. We'll figure this out. If it gets ugly, it gets ugly, but there are players to reach on and there are players not to reach on. And Derek Carr is not a player I'm going to be reaching on that heavily. We're done at tight end. We don't need to worry about that. So let's build out a little bit of contingency or maybe some correlation. Let's go Troy Franklin and give ourselves the Bo Nix stack that I don't really want to be involved in because I don't think it's going to be that great. But yeah. And Death Angel saying, I've straight up seen Carr go undrafted. Yeah, some of these drafts, you get this kind of surge, this rush for teams to hit their quarterback sort of quantity that they want to, whether that's 2 or whether that's 3. And then you see some of these players just really drop. I've seen JJ McCarthy going right around pick 200. I've seen other quarterbacks in that range really slipping. So, Bryce Young, I get why people don't want him. Drake May, we talked about how much he's falling already. Daniel Jones would be a player I'd possibly be willing to take unstacked or maybe throw on a Jalen Hyatt as a late sort of pick for it. Was on Neil Orfield's stream last night with him drafting on BBM, and we hit round 18 and he asked me for a scroll the F down type player, and I threw out Jalen Hyatt. There's been talk about them using him more in the slot this year. Yes, Malik Neighbors is there, but at least Jalen Hyatt doesn't have to get through like 73 different slot receivers this year to earn that role. So I'm not going to go crazy on Jalen Hyatt. I think Rich was all over this last year talking about the scheme in Tennessee was very basic when he came out of college. And whilst there was promise, we didn't want to go nuts. But if I had to add in Daniel Jones unstacked or with Jalen Hyatt would be an okay get out of jail card. But let's see, we're 5 picks away, and Derek Carr's still on the board. Drake May's still on the board. Bryce Young, Bo Nix, Daniel Jones. This quarterback room, it's going to be fine. We're going to make it, people. In terms of the room after this, J.K. Dobbins eventually goes sort of, 20, 25 spots past ADP. No complaints about that. I think that makes sense. Let's do it. I guess 7 spots ahead of ADP is where I'm willing to take Derek Carr just to make that feel a bit better. And now we don't need to worry about the quarterback room for the minute. We can peg on a third later on. But the running back room, we do only have 4. none taken till round 7. We've got James Conner, Blake Corum, Zach Charbonnet, and Jalen Wright. I mean, 3 of those running backs could spend a lot of the time on the bench this year. So we need to find some touches, some players who are going to be on the field early on. If you got guys in this range of a draft that you like from a running back room, drop them in the comments. If they end up on the winning roster, I'll buy you a coffee sometime. Very nice coffee. Def saying, does A.T. Perry go in the queue now? Is that a stretch? I don't mind A.T. Perry, and I think that it's a fine upside shout. At ADP 228, I think there's going to be a lot of drafts where he goes undrafted, so we can kind of just leave him on the back burner and see where we're at when we get to round 20. At running back, I'd be happy if Khalil Herbert makes it to me. I think there's definitely scenarios where he gets traded. Jaleel McLaughlin would give us a bit of stacking upside. I know some people are quite high on him. I think I should probably bounce that. At the minute, I've got Audric Estime at 10%, which doesn't feel like the kind of bet I necessarily want to make. Roshan Johnson at 0% as well in this tournament, 6% across the whole of Draftkings Best Ball. Let's go with Roshan Johnson because it gives us the extra correlations down there, and I think he's probably got a clearer path to that one being a 2 running back room if things shake out and Khalil Herbert gets traded. So, as we head into the back end of round 16, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Chris Olave, Jalen Waddle, Tank Dell, Mark Andrews, George Kittle, James Conner, Rashee Rice, Tua Tagovailoa, Tyler Lockett, Blake Corum, Zach Charbonnet, Jalen Wright, Troy Franklin, Derek Carr, Roshan Johnson. In terms of stacks, we've got Tua, Jalen, and Jalen. Derek Carr, Chris Olave. Got a double Seahawks, Zach Charbonnet, Tyler Lockett. And then in terms of these playoff correlations, you can see them all lighting up green, making for some nice little runs where if players hit that kind of rich pocket of form at the back end of the season, then potentially they'll carry us along quite nicely. Def saying, I like Donta Foreman late. Also a chance one of these fringe RB2s winds up on the Cowboys. P. Ryan would be a smash. Yeah, P. Ryan, definitely a player I've been mixing in. Donta Foreman, I really like too. I think you can tell yourself a story where he's just better than Jerome Ford, or at least definitely better in the passing game. I don't know how much Deshaun Watson's going to be valuable to the running backs in the passing game, but the Browns have definitely involved backs in that area over the years. So, just a couple more picks away. Again, I feel pretty good about the wide receiver room. You know, we hit 7 wide receivers a good while ago. Troy Franklin might not be our last, but he can be close to our last. So, really, here, it's probably time to take Bo Nix if we're going to take the third quarterback. And not overly excited about that. I think that it's not necessarily going to be an incredible rookie year for him. It'll be quite a conservative offense, but sometimes you just need warm bodies. And to a Derek Carr, that's not a 2 QB room build. Like, yeah, like particularly on DraftKings where we've got those 20 rounds, we might as well make use of it, and we can still turn this quite fun. This team ahead of us is 3 quarterbacks, so pleased to see that they did not take Bo Nix and he falls to us. In terms of the room, we've got a 4 quarterback build on the 101. After going Christian McCaffrey, Sam Laporta, Travis Kelce, they added Jared Goff to the Sam Laporta stack. They took Justin Herbert for a Lad McConkey stack. They had Sean Watson and then JJ McCarthy. Sean Watson with Mari Cooper, Jordan Addison for JJ McCarthy. There's 4 going into that. I mean, you don't end up on 4 stacked quarterbacks unless you intend to. It's not something I'd do because basically, I mean, that's four players who only one of them can ever play at one time. But I think what we've seen is this team took Jared Goff, stack with Laporta, took Justin Herbert, stack with Lad McConkey, and then had an oh shit moment when they realized those two quarterbacks are both on week 5 buys. So at that point, you've got to pivot. I'm not sure at that point that I could have brought myself to spend two more of my top 13 picks on quarterbacks, but you definitely had to add a third one. So very understandable. Two picks away, set a quarterback, set a tight end, running back. We're kind of into a range where I've been taking a decent chunk of Evan Hull, probably the clear backup behind Jonathan Taylor. But let's get ready to get hurt again. Last year, Tank Bigsby around the 20% line, didn't work out, failed spectacularly miserably, was really poor in basically every metric you could find. But Doug Pedersen, like this week, he talked unquestioned. It was brought up again, unquestioned. This goes back to last year at the NFL Combine. He said, without being asked about the running back position, that they wanted to get somebody to take some of the workload away from Travis Etienne. And then this year, at the start of OTAs, he says, unprompted, Tank Bigsby needs to seize a bigger role because they want to keep Travis Etienne fresher. And perhaps that means that Travis Etienne is the real player we should be targeting because he's not as worn down and he doesn't end up becoming a half-season warrior like he's been these last 2 years. But if Tank Bigsby is going to develop a role, it's going to be short yardage, it's going to be grinding runs out, and in round 18, I'm okay taking a bet on that. I don't feel like it's particularly bad. 2 rounds left. If you're in this draft, I want to hear how you're feeling about it as it's gone on. James at the free spot after taking CJ Stroud, taking Brevin Jordan as his third tight end just to give himself a stack. I knew he couldn't leave this draft without a stack. It made too much sense. Our team that started with 5 running backs in the first 6 rounds, 2, 6, 7, 3 now. They have Jamar Chase, Kyron Williams, Derrick Henry, Isaiah Pacheco, James Cook, Alvin Kamara, Joe Burrow, Christian Watson, Brock Bowers, Cortland Sutton, Jacoby Myers, Xavier Legette, Baker Mayfield, Jermaine Burton, J.K. Dobbins, Darren Waller, Jatavion Sanders, Jalen McMillan, Devontae Walker. What are you saying? Do we save it? I think it's it's interesting. I think the Darren Waller swing is one that could pay off, if he decides he's not retiring. But I think because of the way that team's built, I would need a different type of player there. And because you've gone Brock Bowers, yeah, I think, I would have taken Noah Fant where they took Darren Waller instead. And where they took Jatavion Sanders, I might have taken Chigakonkwo or Mike Gesicki instead. But it's better than it was. Absolutely. At wide receiver in round 19, not a whole lot of anything that screams particularly pretty. Running back, let's go with Jamal Williams, the guy who scored like 17 touchdowns a year and a half ago. There's reports out of Saints camp that they expect Kendry Miller to take a big role, but the underlying sort of talk there was that they seem to be a bit cooler on Alvin Kamara, that they think that he might be not toast, but kind of on the way down. And while I don't think that means that Jamal Williams is any spring chicken and is suddenly going to take a load of the work, I think that it could be more open than it's been at times. So maybe that's a bad pick and one which I probably won't do a lot of times. But, round 19, got to scroll, got to find some different combinations. And obviously, it gave us a little bit more of a kind of stack with the Saints. And even though we don't need to be saying, okay, that Jamal Williams is going to catch 10 catches a game from Derek Carr, we're just betting on the offense to be good, the offense to be better. We know they brought in a new offensive coordinator who comes from the Shanahan system. Last year, the Saints ranked dead last in motion at the snap. The Niners have always ranked like really highly in that. So if it's a more dynamic, more fun offense, then yeah, perhaps it could be a little bit more fun. So final wide receiver pick, I'm going to go with 8 wide receivers. I've seen enough data from DraftKings drafts to suggest that 8 wide receivers is the minimum I want. It's pretty grim. I know a few people are in on Malik Washington. Otherwise, yeah, it's nobody who screams great value to me. Alex Pierce, you could mix him in. Maybe it is just A.T. Perry. Otherwise, we just keep scrolling and scrolling, and there's a lot of bleakness in here. A lot of dynasty roster cloggers, you can guarantee that. Jake Bobo, I mean, he was a DFS sweetheart for a couple of weeks. 3K on DraftKings, popping up with a couple of touchdowns. But yeah, let's go with A.T. Perry. I think he's not a player I will be end up drafting a lot, but it makes sense in this one. So we finish with a 3-7-8-2. Amon-Ra St. Brown, Chris Olave, Jalen Waddle, Tank Dell, Mark Andrews, George Kittle, James Conner, Rashee Rice, Tua Tagovailoa, Tyler Lockett, Blake Corum, Zach Charbonnet, Jalen Wright, Troy Franklin, Derek Carr, Roshan Johnson, Bo Nix, Tank Bigsby, Jamal Williams, A.T. Perry. In terms of this draft structurally, like I say, I don't do many double elite tight ends, but I kind of like 5th and 6th round for that. We got ourselves into a bit of a corner with quarterback and had to go with 3, but I think that's to Derek Carr, Bo Nix feels fine for that room. I don't really worry about it. I think perhaps what you're hoping for there is that Tua does what he did over the course of the first half of last season, where he was like the QB5 in points per game. Then running back, if one of these players in this range, Blake Corum, Zach Charbonnet, Jalen Wright, doesn't seize a role pretty early, it is going to be tricky. And that might turn into a position where you're like, okay, we could have done something different. So the 5RB build finished 3-6-8-3. It's been the most popular build in the final for 2 years running. Jamar Chase, Kyren Williams, Derrick Henry, Isaiah Pacheco, James Cook, Alvin Kamara, Joe Burrow, Christian Watson, Brock Bowers, Cortland Sutton, Jacoby Myers, Xavier Legette, Baker Mayfield, Jermaine Burton, J.K. Dobbins, Darren Waller, Jatavian Sanders, Jalen McMillan, Devontae Walker. And then the third quarterback right at the end, Aiden O'Connell. I think that's a wasted pick, even though it gives you the stack on Jacoby Myers. I think you needed to just push a bit more chips in on the wide receiver there and get closer to 10. Let's see. James at the 12 spot, Jahmyr Gibbs, Drake London, Zay Flowers, Lamar Jackson for the Ravens stack, Xavier Worthy, Terry McLaurin, Deontay Johnson, Najee Harris, Curtis Samuel, Mike Williams stacked with Aaron Rodgers, which feels quite nice. Jerome Ford, Ty Chandler, Kadar, and Roman Wilson, Tyler Conklin for the Jets stack, Jaleel McLaughlin, Tucker Kraft, who apparently is going to be injured until training camps. We might get some value on him. Rasheen Ali and Braylon Allen for a nice scroll the F down kind of running back combination there. There's massive contingency in that running back pairing. If one of them hits, you've paid off handsomely. Who else we got? We got J Rain 98 at the pick after me. Pure Hero RB build here. Bijan Robinson, Devontae Adams, Malik Neighbors, T. Higgins, Kyle Pitts, Marquise Brown, Jalen Warren, Zach Moss, Romeo Dubs, Brian Robinson, Kirk Cousins, Jerry Jeudy, Josh Downs, Wandale Robinson, Mike Wilson, Daniel Jones stacking the Giants up there with a couple of them. Chigakonkwo, Keaton Mitchell, AJ Dillon, and Clyde Edwards-Hilaire. I like that. I mean, you're talking 2792. It's a nice build. I think that in terms of the tight end room, it's built nicely. You really count on Kyle Pitts to do well. Quarterback, maybe with 2 quarterbacks coming off an injury, you could make a case to have taken a third. But where you would have had to take that, be kind of in this range around here where Daniel Jones was the second, and I'm not sure I would have done that. So I can understand the 2 QB build. And then James at the 103 logged out nice and early so that he doesn't hear me talk about how he took CJ Stroud largely unstacked, apart from Brevin Jordan very late and adding on John Mechie. There's upside in doing that, definitely. I think it's the way to take it, but I just struggle with CJ Stroud unless you got one of his big free receivers, and I'm sure James will agree with me on that. Caleb Williams stacked with DJ Moore, definitely nice. And then, of course, he also has Jaden Daniels with Ben Sinnott, which makes sense. You know, if you're counting on one rookie to break out, then you might as well count on both rookies to have good seasons. That's going to do it for us. Lots going on. We will be back on Monday for the Underdog Best Ball show. We will have Hope from Underdog on talking about some of the contests that she's set up this year, why they're different to how they've been in previous years. Next Wednesday will be a big show with Pat Crane. Loads to get through with him. Definitely worth dropping some questions in the Discord or in the comments below after this stream finishes. Tight end strategy video will be out in the next few days. Rich has got Dynasty buys and sells, Dynasty Theory videos coming. So much stuff on the Fantasy Sanctuary. Smash the like button, smash the subscribe button. Leave me a comment telling me what you enjoyed about this video. We will be back very soon. Appreciate everyone for hanging out tonight.